while focusing a lot on the market, the reality is a sales organization like mine also needs to focus on collaboration between colleagues, not only within our German or European organization, but actually globally, because DT has global offices, and we need to make sure that we pick their brains as well and use their relationships to our customers also for our business.
Welcome to another fabulous episode of the B2B Sales Trends podcast, my lovely people, the show that brings you hacks, tips, thought leadership to the topic of B2B selling. My name is Harry Kendlbacher, and today's episode is all about how to move from commodity to be a sales or a service enabler, shall I say. How to move from commodity to service enabler. And my expert for today, I'm particularly pleased about his appearance in our episode today, is Benny Bastians. Benny is the Chief Commercial Officer from the Deutsche Telekom IoT. Welcome to the B2B Sales Trends podcast, Benny.
Harry, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for making time. To kick this off with, Benny, you are the Chief Commercial Officer at Deutsche Telekom IoT. Can you start by sharing a little bit about your role, what your team is focused on today, and how we got to this place today?
Sure, absolutely. Again, thank you very much for having me. I think this is a great opportunity to get into the conversation, and I've been listening to your podcast for quite some time. I really love the insights, and I'm very pleased to be part of it today, to be able to contribute to this well. So I'm Benny Bastians. I lead our global IoT sales organization within Deutsche Telekom. That basically means that I look after the sales teams that are managing our customers in an acquisition as well as account management. And we basically serve our customers with connectivity services that help them to connect their products. That's what IoT is about. And basically you can say that we have an automotive team that has a special vertical focus on connected car services. And this is where basically the team works very closely with global car manufacturers. It's a highly strategic game. It's very global. It's a long-term initiative in most cases. It's very deep. It's very complex, right? So this is where we have dedicated salespeople that live and breathe automotive. And then on the other side, we have a sales team that is, I would say, a more universal sales team that would sell to any other industry. Could be a smart meter, could be industrial machines, or even consumer electronics. This is where we don't really have the vertical focus. It's more the case that, like I said, it's a universal sales approach, where we oftentimes walk into completely new customer situations, because depending on what the product of our customers is, we need to understand how we can help them to connect it.
So interesting. It's a fascinating piece of business there, and I hope we can get to some examples later on today. In our pre-call to this episode, we discussed a lot about telco, the different customers, and the fact that they sort of used of thinking of connectivity as a commodity, gigabytes, minutes, data plans and so forth. Yet in IoT, that connectivity is really often mission critical, if I may say this. How do you help your sales teams to really reframe the conversation from commodity really to outcomes, so that buyers really see it as an enabler of those outcomes rather than just a commodity?
Absolutely. And that, Harry, is really the heart of IoT sales. That's our big challenge. And I'll share with you how we tackle that challenge. First of all, I described that we have those two separate sales teams, one with an automotive focus and the other one with a more universal focus. But what really unites both is the mission that we're transforming connectivity from being seen as a connectivity to more like an enabler of global products and services. And that at the same time is the hard part. That's the heavy lifting of the job, right? So what we can see is that most of the most of the buyers' behavior when they think telco, they still think in number of SIM cards and megabytes and in tariffs and data plans at the end of the day, right? So we need to make sure that they understand the IoT world is very different. Connectivity basically is a mission critical piece in their product offering. A car, a medical device, or a logistics service just simply does not work without connectivity. So we need to make sure that our sales organization, when they meet the customer, they reframe the conversation. Instead of talking price per gigabyte, we need to talk about the business outcome that our connectivity contributes to when they use it in the right way. Also, a very important factor is the global scalability. Typically, a buyer who buys from a telco would typically buy a domestic service. And IoT is global by design. You don't run a global product in 50 countries on 50 domestic IoT connectivity contracts, right? So what basically we need to do is we need to make sure that they understand the value that connectivity contributes to their product, and our sales organization needs to understand to reframe the whole conversation around output-based selling rather than tariffs and price per gigabyte. You might wonder how we do this. Well,
I do. That was just about to be my next question. Yeah. Maybe. Absolutely. You read my mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, I prepared, Harry. I think, training clearly is part of it, but also we need to make sure that we give our sales organization a framework which they can apply with their customers. That's of course sales enablement, where they need to, have a toolkit, basically a sales pitch that they can adapt and modify based on the customer requirements. But also it's very important that incentives for the sales organization is not just based on, the total contract volume based on a price per gigabyte, but it's also aligned to what we want to achieve with the customer, and that's their business outcome. So that's clearly something that requires continuous work also on the management side to make sure that we give our sales organization the right incentive to frame it in the way that we want it to be framed in front of the customer.
Interesting. You mentioned that it is key really for your customers to understand the value of connectivity. And that sounds fantastic. I boiled that down to the salespeople, and I have no doubt you have great salespeople, by the way. How do they not fall into their comfort zone to talk about, the specifications of the product again, or talk about gigabytes and so forth? How do they really frame that the conversation around value of connectivity well? And we deal all the time with salespeople who continue to fall back. They know what to do intellectually. They understand that, and it makes total sense to what you do or what you say. But a lot of the times during those conversations, they keep falling back into this. How do you prevent your people from doing that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Harry. I think we are an IoT unit within within a big telco, and we are one of the largest telcos in the world. Clearly, in our DNA, we like to talk about technical specifications, about coverage, about rate plans, because that's really how the telco game has been in the last decades, and in some parts of the business it still is. But when we talk IoT, we need to make sure that we continuously understand that it's not about the technical specs, it's about the business outcome. And one of the things how we do it basically is we need to have a leadership team that actually leads by example. That is one of my most important things that I see as also part of my role. I have customer meetings every week, and I make sure that the sales people that actually join me in this call understands that I'm sometimes framing the whole conversation with the customer in a very different way, just to remind them what IoT selling really is about. But also, I think we need to make sure that when a salesperson has succeeded to flip that conversation from a technology-based to a value conversation, that we actually celebrate that as a success already. And we make sure that other salespeople understand how it was done. And we make sure that we actually give incentives based on repeating this type of behavior in front of the customer, plus coaching, plus training. But like I said in the beginning, that's the heavy lifting of being a sales leader in a telco world for IoT. But we're in a really good way here.
It is interesting, you know, in the industry, especially when you talk about upskilling salespeople and how they need to engage with their clients differently, and how do they shift from the old mindset to really a value mindset or outcome focused mindset. It's in my opinion, there's two things involved in it. Is first of all is I, as a salesperson, have to change my mindset to be able to think and act in terms of outcomes. And that's a mindset first. I got to have the will first to do it. But then I also need the skill to be able to execute that. And then, of course, I need to be able to execute that at a high level, right? I need to be able to practice this in a good environment, and training and all these things that you've mentioned are coming into play then. I do think a lot of the time the leadership aspect of things that you have referred to is underestimated by organizations. And it's one thing for a leader to say, yes, that's what we have to do. It's another thing for the sales organization to really execute that and being coached to and making sure they're being held accountable for that and so forth. What's your take on that?
I agree. And, I also expect my leadership team to do the same and actually be in the front line, talk to customers and make sure that they also learn on, what we need to understand to position our value proposition better in front of the customer. Another angle to this, Harry, is we also need to make sure that we know our strengths in the market and position that in the right way. In the telco industry, you still have players that actually have connectivity, that sell SIM cards and gigabytes and, what the old telco world used to sell. But if I look at my value proposition, the true ability to deliver a global service that's scalable and that's at the highest quality is something that only a very few of our competitors can actually get closer to. And that's really something that we need to understand when we have a conversation with our customers, that they understand the value of dealing with someone like us compared to the others that do it in the old way. But that also requires our sales organization to be able to articulate the advantages of working with a global organization like ours, because in the end of the day, if you're a car manufacturer and your car rolls off the production line, you don't care where it's being sold to, whether it's in Germany or anywhere else in the world. You ship it to 50 countries globally, and it just needs to be seamlessly connected. So when you made the mistake of buying from someone who was talking SIM cards and gigabytes to you only, you end up risking having a bad service for your customers in, whatever circumstances you put the car in together with your customer. And I think another aspect to this also is that the costs for telecommunication services have gone down over the last couple of years. So in many cases, our customers expect us to have a service that gets cheaper over time in the end of the day. And we need to be very careful, because at the same time, IoT customers need to understand that they shouldn't only buy over price. They need a partner that keeps up with their requirements, that keeps up with their needs of innovation to make sure that their device is connected over the last decade in most cases, right? And over the next decade, we'll see different technologies that come and go, and they need a partner that still has a reasonable price, but at the end of the day gives them the long-term ability to have a successful product out there in the market. Everybody wants to save money. That's very clear. And that's what purchasing organizations are there for. But at the same time, they really need to make sure that as we become such an integral part of their product, they plan with us for a longer time and they pick the right partner for this.
Absolutely. When I listen to you, it's fascinating. It sounds like you have not just embedded a really cool thinking within your people through your leadership, but also a real culture. That's what I believe a lot of the times organizations are lacking, that culture and that accountability, that people really are executing what leadership requires to be executed. What tips can you give our audience, especially the leadership component of our audience, on how you embed a culture? How do you get that accountability? It's one thing for us or for a leader to say, this is what we have to do. I mean, there is countless of research done that, the biggest issue with strategies is that they're not getting executed. They stay on the piece of paper and nobody's doing anything with it because the sales teams typically either don't have the skills and so forth to execute that. So how do you tackle that? How do you embed that culture and that accountability within your organization? What tips can you give people on that?
I think a very natural thing that everybody should have in mind and not underestimate is also the power of the incentive plan that is given to the sales organization.
Right.
So you can't expect a different behavior in your sales organization if you incentivize in the same old way as you have done over the last years. Because that's really something that is, I believe, important for a sales rep to understand, these are my targets. If I meet these targets, then, I have a certain bonus to expect from the company. So this is, I believe, a very important aspect in a cultural change. A second thing, like we said now also before, but it's as important to mention it again, lead by example. Go out there, be part of the customer conversation and understand what the type of conversations are that the customers are expecting us to have in the front line. And the third aspect is, I think we as a sales organization, and that's also a cultural thing in my world, we need to celebrate successes in a better way. And successes isn't always, the big deal that, people crafted on for a year or two. It's also the smaller deals, those that were a bit more tricky. And we need to make sure that we celebrate them in the right way, especially those where we found out that the seller did an extremely good job in flipping that coin from a gigabyte conversation to a value-based conversation. Because if people see that these successes are seen by leadership and that you actually celebrate it in the right way, then people, of course, strive to repeat this a lot more often.
Right. I would imagine that the scalability of what you're trying to do is a real challenge, and it sounds like you've done a fabulous job in tackling it. Obviously, we have a variety of different industries coming from listeners, plenty of customers and companies outside of telco are really trying to sort of tackle the same issue. How do we get away from a commodity selling towards enabling customer value? And, part of our business is not just to enable salespeople, but also we enable our buyers and procurement people. And it is interesting when you ask procurement people, what is high on their priority? And it's never price, really. It's always how do we minimize our risk? How do we collaborate effectively, and so forth. but of course they lead with a commodity conversation. That's one way to commoditize you and your services, right? What lessons from your IoT business do you think apply more broadly to sales leaders in other sectors as well? I mean, you've shared already a few, the incentive plan and celebrate different successes and so forth. What other lessons can you share with other sales leaders in other sectors?
Well, Harry, this question reminds me of something a gentleman said a couple of episodes ago. He said, when he engages into an executive conversation with his customer, he always asks a simple question. Do you understand the value we bring to the table? And in most cases, he continued, the customer said, you know what? No, I don't. My team tells me you're important, but to me, you're just a cost. And my job is to bring the costs down. That's basically, I don't know if you remember, it was like 3 or 4 episodes ago. I think it was a really good one. And this really sticks with me because that's something that I will do from now on, asking my customers, do you understand the value that we're bringing to the table? Or do you see us as just another line item on your cost sheet? And I think it's a very important question that our sales people should ask their customers, because Harry, you said a little while ago that we always risk salespeople falling into their comfort zone and selling technical specifications. At the same time, the buyers might fall into their comfort zone, looking at us just as a telco. So we need to continuously question the status quo and see if they really see us in the way we want to be seen. That's one factor. And another factor, and that's the advantage of being an IoT unit in a larger telco like we are, we have so many other pieces in our portfolio that we can combine to the customer to an end-to-end solution. So we need to make sure that we collaborate well with the rest of the organization, because they have customer relationships as well. We can basically improve their deals as well, vice versa. So while focusing a lot on the market, the reality is a sales organization like mine also needs to focus on collaboration between colleagues, not only within our German or European organization, but actually globally, because DT has global offices, and we need to make sure that we pick their brains as well and use their relationships to our customers also for our business.
Now that's interesting. Now, how do you manage that balance, between being a specialist overlay unit, let's say, and collaborating with those core salespeople, those core sales team? You've mentioned collaboration internally. I would assume with a business like yours, that is huge on their agenda. How do you manage that balance between those different teams?
It is huge on the agenda. And that's also something that, of course, the group leadership expects the different business units to do. It doesn't always come naturally. I need to be very frank on this one. Sometimes you really need to understand how can you bring the teams together to collaborate for a certain service, for a certain client. And you know what? The reality is sometimes you see collaboration doesn't always make sense, right? Sometimes you need to go alone. Sometimes you need to be in your very own deal, because you're talking to a person on the customer side who has no relationship to the people that someone else in our organization is talking to at the same client. So I think, on our side, in most cases, collaboration with the core sales team makes a lot of sense. We take great advantage of their insights into customers, into their relationship with the customers. In many cases, they understand that our IoT service adds value to their portfolio, which they represent in front of the customer. But at the same time, in some cases, we have to also decide to work to the customer separately and make a separate sale, which is also okay.
Right. Right. Fascinating. Benny, we are unfortunately at the end of our time together today. Share with me your opinion on the last question that I ask on every single podcast is, what are, in your opinion, the top 3 qualities of an elite salesperson? In other words, these days buying has changed. Buyers trying to commoditize us. We need to break out of this. Just all the things we've discussed. What are the top 3 things that salespeople need to do to be able to tackle that issue nowadays?
If there were only 3 things, Harry, but
yeah, you got to limit it, and you got to prioritize and rank them in order. There you go.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for the challenge. I take it. So if I look at the top 3, I think number 1 must be curiosity. Right. A salesperson must be curious. They must be able to be so curious that they end up understanding our customers' industry almost as good as our own industry and our own product. The second is resilience. I think, sales is all about setbacks from time to time, right? You don't always win. And especially in a large organization like ours, it sometimes also is pretty complex to, put a deal together and to put it in a way that you really want it to be. So you need to be very resilient and also be able to deal with setbacks in the right way. And third, and that's something that I introduced recently into my organization, have an ecosystem mindset. Nowadays, no one sells alone anymore. No one sells alone anymore. In a global play like ours, you need to be able to collaborate and to manage the relationship between not only the customer and you and maybe the core salesperson, but there are partners involved, there are other ecosystem players involved. So you need to make sure that you orchestrate what's required to put together this whole service for the customer. And not everybody has that natural behavior of collaborating across the board. But I think it's important, and it will be even more important moving forward, to have that ecosystem mindset.
I love that. That was a different. Your third point was certainly different to what the majority of people say. What the top 3 things are. So thank you, and I really believe that is actually spot on nowadays. That you really need to have people not just focus on their agenda, but really contribute to what is the higher business purpose in this case, and that is providing outcomes to our clients. And so we all have to contribute, not just focus on our individual things that we need to do, but how do we raise above that and get focused on what is really important. Benny, thank you. I know our listeners very, very much appreciate your insights and your thought leadership. Thank you for contributing to the collective pool of knowledge, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Harry. It was a pleasure.
My lovely people, there are 2 calls to actions. Go to the b2bsalestrends.com, subscribe or share this or other episodes with people who you think this might be important or applicable to. It's all about sharing that collective knowledge. It's all about making sure we're all learning from each other, salespeople, leaders, and senior leadership, as well as go to globalperformancegroup.com. Check out our items on how to increase win rates. I'm sure that you find that interesting. And until the next episode, look after yourself, look after your loved ones, and of course, your B2B customers. Bye-bye.